Hello, Alex here, and in this video I want to talk about equipment failure and dealing with the loss of photographs after a trip I went on to London to see some friends where most of my pictures, and certainly most of my best pictures, didn't really come out because of yet another issue with my Rolleiflex SL66. So let's get into it. Not so long ago, a couple of my friends, Kalle and Kai from Sweden and New England, were going to be in London at the same time, so we made plans where I would go over, we'd meet up with a couple of local friends, Ren and Kay, and we'd all just hang out for a couple of days, take some pictures. These guys are all really sincere people and fantastic photographers, so do check out their Instagram accounts if you want to see what they get up to. Though I did bring the GFX 100S with me, my real camera for the trip was the SL66 because I just got it back from having some work done on the shutter, and my test roll was fine, so I really wanted to put it through its paces, and a change of scenery seemed like a good opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, this trip highlighted yet another issue that I wasn't aware of before getting the work on the shutter done, and most of the pictures didn't come out well, or really at all. I did have to get up at like a stupid o'clock in the morning, but the flight out was actually fine. Getting film hand-checked in Dublin is usually not a problem, though I do always bring a dummy roll of Delta 3200. After I landed and got to the train station, I loaded up a roll of 220 Aerocolor from Reflex Labs. This is your standard Kodak Aerocolor 2460, but in medium format, which is almost impossible to get. But it was only after I loaded the film that I actually took a meter reading and realized, oh god, I'm in London in January. Yeah, it's way too dark to shoot ISO 100 film handheld, so I did have to commit to pushing 2 stops, but thankfully this film handles that just fine. When I met Kai and we said our hellos, we went for a quick wander along the Thames for a bit before meeting up with Ren and checking out his new to him Fuji 690. And oh god, we all spoiled him with new, expired or rare 120 and 220 film this weekend, so it's all downhill from there, but it's a beautiful example of a beautiful camera. Then we all made a quick stop to the Tate Modern, which I'd never actually been to, despite being born not too far from London. And then after that we went for the walk down to Aperture Printing to meet up with Kay, and we all picked up some film. I picked up some Lomo 800 because I had Delta 3200 with me, but I really wanted to shoot color on this trip, and besides, I'd never actually shot Lomo 800 in 120 format before. Kay took us for a walk to Aperture UK, which is the other shop, and we got to see some incredible gear there. I had never actually seen a Fuji 617 or the Schneider Kreuznach 72mm XL in person, but that Schneider lens is gargantuan. I really had no idea. We got some food and then went for kind of a photo walk before peeling off in our different directions, and Kay and I kept going in more or less the same direction for a while, and I got my absolute favorite picture from the trip on the Fuji. Even if the Rollei were working fine, this still would have been my favorite picture, and the lighting absolutely makes it. This car was presented stunningly. Have you noticed what's wrong with the Rollei pictures yet? I woke up really early the next day, so I had some time to kill before meeting up with the others, and I went shooting around Camden to try and take advantage of the lens tilt and lens reversal options that the Rollei has that let you play with creative depth of field or even just a bit of macro photography without needing a dedicated lens, extension tubes or extra bellows. I was trying to get some practice in with like Ribsy style street portraiture and really wasn't having much luck because a lot of people didn't want their pictures taken, which is fine. But one of the guys, Francois, who I didn't get a picture with, had a Rolleiflex f2.8 with him, and he was shooting on HP5 and just very thankful that the skies were a bit better on Sunday than they were on Saturday, so he was able to get a bit more texture in the sky with the yellow filter. Good choice. I did also have like a Leica Man TM walk past me, see this, and just nod and tell me, it'll do. Okay? Even though that really caught me off guard and threw me off for a bit, I got some nice pictures around here and finished off the roll of 220 and left the Rollei unloaded until after we got food. We went wandering for a bit, taking some pictures before we met Kalle, who just landed, and then we went for lunch together in Roti Chai, recommended by Ren. Absolutely incredible place. And we got talking about what we were going to be shooting for a bit and what we were going to do for the afternoon. I asked the guys for their opinion. Should I shoot Delta 3200 at 12,800? Which is no big deal for the record. I did 51,000 a couple of weeks ago and it was perfect, relatively speaking. Or shoot the Lomo 800 at 6400. And when I called it Lomo 6400, I could see like a visceral reaction from everybody, so that was obviously what I was going to do. So load that, push it 3 stops, kind of just shoot high contrast scenes, forget shadow detail, and take what I get. Surprisingly, the 3-stop push was handled extremely well by Loma 800. On the walk back to the Tate Modern, Kai let us try out his Ricoh GXR, which is the most monstrous camera I've ever seen in my life. It's tiny, but it's an affront to technology. It's a modular camera where these modules come off the front and you can swap them out, each containing a sensor, mount, and the processing power for that sensor. So you could have, say, in theory, an F-mount full-frame sensor, 12 megapixel, and an EF mount, a 24 megapixel monochrome sensor, and then use those with the same camera. It's a really weird thing. He had the really rare, or relatively rare, M-mount module that he was using on his lenses that he had for his M6. And yeah, this is just like an infernal doohickey that I absolutely love, but also really hate because it's so janky, it shouldn't work, and honestly, I'm not really surprised that the project didn't take off and eventually died. We decided to go to the Joel Meyerowitz exhibition that was on in the Tate Modern that day, which was absolutely incredible. Seeing all of the pairs of images in color and black and white really pushed forth this idea that I've had for a long time but never been able to communicate effectively, certainly not as well as he did, that, you know, neither black and white or color is better than the other. They're both amazing mediums in which to present your art, and neither one is better than the other. And honestly, I think that anyone who says that black and white is a crutch or color is a crutch is just a quirky absolutist who's trying to make up for their own inferiority and inability to use both mediums. Anyway, I took some portraits in there, including this one of Calais that I really liked. It was like 1/15 of a second at f4 up against a light exhibition, and the blue light here fading into purple works really nicely. We ended up staying there until the museum actually closed and we were more or less kicked out, so I had to take some 1-second exposures braced up against a fence to try and finish off the roll just to get it out of the camera. These actually came out surprisingly well. They're not sharp, but they are more than usable. Then after some heartfelt goodbyes, I had to make my way back to the airport because it was just a weekend trip for me. I was going back to work the next day, and most of my film was forced through the X-ray, which thankfully didn't damage anything. But I got home at like midnight. I went to work for like 8 the next morning, survived the day, popped up on sugar and caffeine, came home, loaded up the Jobo and developed 11 rolls in I think 4, maybe 5 processes, normal, pushed, pulled, black and white film, and some slide that next evening, before I genuinely did collapse, and I don't remember most of the next few days because I was probably just in a sleep-deprived, like, fugue state. So the trip was amazing, but like I said, it's just an excuse to talk about a topic here. What was actually wrong with the Rolleiflex this time? I went through all of my pictures with a fine-tooth comb because I thought, you know, I had just got work done on it, I had installed a new focusing screen. I'm not that bad at focusing under dim, dark conditions, even though most of these pictures were indoors on a grey, dark weekend. But then I realized that the photos that were the worst affected were at wider apertures, and it didn't make a difference whether I was focused close or far away. Every photo was slightly out of focus, specifically front focused. After a bit of testing and playing around for the next week, I eventually found out that now, this is a bellows focusing camera. When I twist this knob, the lens moves farther away from the film. When it was fully retracted all the way, it wasn't actually going all the way in. I'll get some B-roll, but there's a little hard stop here you can see on the right side of the camera, separate to the left side with the focusing knob. The lens to film distance was always slightly too high, meaning the lens was constantly front focusing. Now, you're gonna ask, or quite a few people have asked as well on Flickr and other sites, surely you'd see this in the viewfinder. What I found out is, okay, so the optical path from the lens to the film is too long. Someone had moved the position of the focusing screen, which is something you can calibrate on this camera, to match the incorrectly set front standard. Now, there are a bunch of ways that that could have come loose and ended up sticking too far forward, either a bad reassembly job after a repair, or if you tilt the lens too much and try and pull the bellows back in now, it'll kind of rub against the top of the camera or the bottom, depending. And that took a lot of work to get right, because I basically had to, because I couldn't trust the finder, blindly disassemble the left side of the focusing mechanism so I could disconnect the focusing knob from the focusing rail, set the lens all the way back, because it can actually go slightly too far back, get it about right, reconnect everything, shoot a full test roll, because you can't do like a 5 exposure roll or whatever with 120. Develop that, scan them, because I was taking critical focus at wide apertures, and then see if it was right. Thankfully, I got it pretty much perfect first try. With the 40mm at f4, it is a slight smidge shy of infinity. This is like a 20-30 micron tolerance, and if I can eyeball it good enough that f5.6 is okay, that's good enough for me at this point. And then I had to go and set the camera up on a tripod and, using a screwdriver, recalibrate the focusing screen to match the true infinity of the lens. There are two broad ways your equipment can fail. Very, very broadly. Something like this. I don't know why I put the thing down. Where something goes out of spec and everything seems fine, but then your pictures actually don't come out right. A more common and easily recognized example would be something like a rangefinder going out of calibration. So your patch and your lens don't match properly anymore, and that causes you to miss focus. Or maybe your shutter speeds start to go a bit wonky and slower speeds overexpose, or faster speeds start to shutter cap, these kind of things. Or your camera gear can just completely fail and jam something and snap, break, and the camera becomes unusable. That's more painful in terms of getting the thing repaired. But when you're out on a trip or on a job, that's almost better, because then the camera isn't working right. If this thing had just jammed and stopped working, I could have sent it off for yet another repair and just used the digital camera for the rest of the trip. But because I thought it was working, I was taking a bunch of pictures, portraits of strangers that were really good compositionally and exposed well, and bar the focusing issue, actually like really free of motion blur. A lot of these pictures were half a second to 1/8 of a second handheld on medium format film with an SLR, and I'm very happy that I got stable shots, or usably stable shots. But the vast majority of them are just out of focus and I can't use them, and that just sucks. But there's nothing you can really do about it. We're shooting in an old medium, even with new film cameras coming out, film still being available now. There are relatively few repair techs out there, and most of them are swamped with work from the few of us who are willing to get gear repaired. Personally, I'm lucky that I'm in a position where I can, afford to just pay someone to repair certain things and keep the craft alive, so to speak, to paraphrase somebody. There's a reason the cheapest crap on eBay is the cheapest crap, or any other site, and if a deal seems too good to be true, it probably is. The more I use this camera, the more I realize that the deal that I got is actually kind of justified in a way. I've had to spend a lot of time and a lot of money to try and get this thing actually fully operational, and I'm glad to say that it is now. Since that trip, I've shot another 10 or 13 rolls. Yeah, there are a few more on the table there, not developed, so maybe we'll call it 15. And they're all perfect. Amazing focus. The focusing screen is amazing. They're sharp. I'm having an absolute blast with it. But I did lose most of the good pictures from that one trip. And ironically, some of the pictures from that trip that were shot at, say, f2.8 and were in focus were only because it was dark and I back focused and missed focus when I was trying to take the shot in the first place. So I hope you take care of your gear. I don't know what the real point of this video is beyond just take care of your stuff and get a CLA. I just wanted to talk about this trip and moan about it. Not specific to the SL66, even though it is easy to clown on this camera and how fragile it is. This could happen with anything. This could happen with a digital camera where one of the shutter curtains gets bent and then rips the rest of them apart. It could happen with a more reliable SLR like the Canon UF1. That thing's an absolute tank, but it could and eventually will fail at some point. We just have to be prepared when we're taking photographs on film to accept that sometimes they aren't going to come out, whether it's in the darkroom, whether it's in the camera, or whether it's just something else. Maybe they get x-rayed, maybe you lose the film, maybe someone steals it off your porch. It sucks and it hurts, and it's just something that I wanted to talk about. So I'm going to shut up and stop rambling, because this has been a very long take. So stay safe, and bye-bye for now. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at Shaka1277 for new pictures every day. If you liked this video and enjoy what I do on the channel, please consider subscribing or checking out my Patreon, where the tiers start at just €1 per month.